I'm Robin Higgins, and this is What Does Supersaturated Mean? Okay, so if we're going to define supersaturated, let's first define saturated. So let's say I have a glass of water. Okay, so now I'm going to start adding salt to that water. Now at first, when you put it in and you stir, it's going to completely dissolve. And you can actually add a lot of salt to water, but eventually if you keep on adding, there's going to reach a point where no matter how much you stir, you're going to start seeing little salt crystals on the bottom. And now when you start seeing this, no matter how much you stir, no matter what you do, you still see salt crystals that can't go into solution. This is the saturation point. And actually it's right before you see anything. So you see the first salt crystal and then you get rid of that one salt crystal so there's nothing. That's your saturation point. So that means that your solution is saturated. Now, what does supersaturated mean? Well, let's say we took our saturated solution let's say this one is saturated, and we now started heating it up. Now, when you heat a substance, the solubility of the solute goes up because there's more energy for the molecules to mix with each other, and the heat really adds solubility. So let's say now you're heating it under a flame. You need to learn how to draw flames. And now you can dump more and more salt in. So you're not super saturated yet because there's a different saturation point for every different temperature. But let's say now you take this hot, salty water and you remove the flame and you just let it sit there and you let it cool slowly. Well, with some substances, you won't start seeing salt reform. It'll just stay in solution. And when it comes all the way down to room temperature, maybe you are able to fit in 3 or 4 more spoonfuls of salt that haven't crashed out. So if you did them just the regular stirring technique, you would see a bunch of salt on the bottom, but because you slowly heated it up and then slowly let it cool down, it stays in there. Now that is supersaturated, when you've passed the point that you can normally get into your liquid through kind of trickery. And so some cool things about this is that if you take your supersaturated cup of salty water and you add one little granule of salt and let it hit the surface, it'll act as a seed, like a catalyst. And all of a sudden, all the salt will spread on the top and it'll create a little layer because it all crashes out at once. And this process is actually how you form rock candy. Except, obviously, it's with sugar. That'd be some gross rock candy. It's by doing supersaturation and then getting it to all crystallize out. All right, I'm Robin Higgins, and this is What Does Supersaturated Mean?